Coming off their big win over in-state rival Colorado State last weekend, Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes are back at home at Folsom Field for Week 4, where they will welcome the Baylor Bears. This game marks the beginning of Big 12 conference play for Colorado, 2-1, returning to the conference after a 13-year absence while they were in the Pac-12. The Buffaloes are aiming to find more success in their former conference than they did in their stint on the West Coast, where they finished last in the Pac-12 in each of the previous 2 seasons. Every game for Colorado feels more significant than the last as they continue searching for their identity under Sanders. Last week's win over Colorado State was huge for the program and Sanders, especially in what felt like a must-win situation. However, questions still linger about who this team is and what they are capable of achieving, particularly now in a new conference that seems to be up for grabs. Baylor, 2-1, under head coach Dave Aranda, also has plenty to prove this season, as Aranda looks to solidify his standing after a disappointing campaign last year. The Bears have already lost one conference game to Utah, but are coming off solid win over Air Force last week. It may be encouraging for Aranda and the Bears that in the last 4 meetings between these teams, Baylor has a 3-1 record, including their most recent encounter in 2010, when they defeated Colorado 31-25. The Buffaloes will hope to avoid a similar outcome this weekend. With that in mind, let's dive into some bold predictions for Colorado against Baylor in Week 4. Colorado puts up over 400 yards of total offense against Baylor. Baylor may technically boast the 13th-ranked total defense in the country, allowing just 230 yards per game at 3.84 yards per play, but it's essential to consider the context of their early season opponents. 2 of those games were against FCS Tarleton State and Air Force. Meanwhile, their loss to Utah, in which they allowed 23 points, comes with a caveat. Utah's starting quarterback, Cam Rising, was pulled before halftime after suffering an injury, and the Utes didn't score again after the first half. If the Buffaloes stay healthy, they will have 2 of the most dynamic players on the field in Shedeur Sanders and Heisman Trophy hopeful Travis Hunter. That connection has consistently paid off early this season, with both players making a significant impact. Alongside them, players like Jimmy Horn Jr. have contributed to the Buffaloes averaging 394.3 yards per game at 6.33 yards per play. Expect Colorado to have a big day offensively against Baylor's relatively untested defense. Colorado continues to be one of the worst penalized teams in the country, committing at least 10. A persistent issue that has plagued Colorado since Coach Prime took over as head coach is their tendency to rack up penalties. Last season, the Buffaloes averaged 8.9 penalties per game, a troubling number that has only worsened this year, jumping to 10.5 per game per team rankings. In their game against Colorado State last week, the Buffaloes were flagged 12 times for 115 yards, highlighting their ongoing discipline issues. This isn't a problem that seems likely to be corrected overnight. So, don't be surprised if Colorado commits at least 10 penalties against Baylor, continuing their undisciplined trend. Micah Welch scores first career touchdown against Baylor. The running game has never been a strong point for the Buffaloes the last 2 seasons. Colorado has relied heavily on Shedeur to facilitate the offense as a more pass-happy team. Some of that has been by design, while some has been from necessity due to the Buffaloes' lack of offensive line production. It took until Week 3, but Colorado finally produced a 100-yard rushing game against Colorado State last week. Most of that was off freshman running back Micah Welch, who had 9 carries for 65 yards. That only thing missing was his first career touchdown. That can happen this weekend. Colorado beats Baylor by 2 scores. As mentioned, both teams are still looking to establish their identities early in the season. For Baylor's Dave Aranda, every game feels like a must-win as he coaches to keep his job. Meanwhile, Sanders isn't on the hot seat, but he still needs to stack up some wins if Colorado aims to reach a bowl game this season. While the win over Colorado State might be viewed as a victory over a lesser opponent in hindsight, it could serve as a springboard for more success for the rest of the season. Colorado will certainly face tougher challenges ahead, but they have a prime opportunity to secure a win against Baylor this Saturday. This is a matchup that suits the Buffaloes well, and they should capitalize on it to build momentum.